Hi, welcome to another episode of the JimRPG show. It's April 22nd, 2020. We've got a lot of news to cover today, so let's get straight into it. Alright, so the first article that I have today is Final Fantasy VII Remake slashes past 3.5 million copies. Milestone in 3 days. So it says the official Final Fantasy VII Remake Twitter account noted the milestone earlier today. All of us would like to raise our Buster Swords to say thank you to everyone who has supported us during launch. It tweeted, "We hope you're all enjoying the game." Final Fantasy VII Remake's 3.5 million doesn't quite reach Final Fantasy XV's launch day record of 5 million sold, but Final Fantasy XV wasn't released as a PlayStation 4 exclusive. It came out on the Xbox One as well. Final Fantasy XV also wasn't launched in the middle of a pandemic that's wreaking havoc on the game industry's supply lines. So firstly, I was told on Twitter, Final Fantasy XV, it shipped 5 million, but it's not quite sold through. So here where it says 5 million sold, it is 5 million shipped, but in the end, they only ended up selling 2 million on the first day at launch. So it's not quite correct here. That doesn't mean that Final Fantasy VII Remake's 3.5 million isn't a good milestone. It certainly is in the face of all of the things that's going on around the world currently. But 3.5 million. I think it's best to just put into context against some of the other video game launches. Otherwise, we don't really know exactly what 3.5 million really means. So I'll get to that in a sec. But let's just finish the rest of the article. Again, it says, with most game stores shut down because of the pandemic, despite GameStop's best efforts to stay open, getting a physical copy of a game is no longer as simple as walking into a mall. Final Fantasy VII Remake's 3.5 million sold might have been a high number in a world that's not currently at the mercy of angry microbes. Well, to be honest, with so many people downloading games digitally, we've been through our entire generation where games have been available digitally. I don't see any reason why somebody would want to go and get a physical copy anymore. Even if they really wanted to, they could have it shipped, through an online retailer like Amazon. So I'm not sure if it would have affected numbers too much. Maybe on sales and things, because places like Walmart or GameStop might have sales on the first day, but because it on the PlayStation Network store, you're unlikely to get a sale of the game because it doesn't have to compete with anyone else. So that could have affected numbers because the price of the game would have been a bit higher than normal, basically recommended retail price. But if you wanted to play the game and you're stuck at home, you're probably buying this game. So that article was from Nardi Oxford. But like I said, we should compare this 3.5 million sold with some of the other launches in the game industry. And actually, it's really interesting to see what other games sold. So this is in chronological order from Wikipedia. So 2019, Pokemon Sword and Shield sold 6 million copies worldwide during their launch weekend, and are among the fastest selling Nintendo Switch games of all time. So Final Fantasy VII selling 3.5 million is great, but it seems like Pokemon is a bigger franchise at the moment. 2019 video game Borderlands 3 sold 5 million units within its first 5 days, which is huge because the previous game, the designers and publishers Gearbox did was Battleborn, and that sold very poorly. But that was coming up against Overwatch. So Borderlands 3, a return to form, I guess, for Gearbox, selling 5 million units in its first 5 days. 2018 Nintendo Switch game, Super Mario Smash Bros. Ultimate 5 million. Red Dead Redemption 2 shipped 10 million. Monster Hunter World 5 million. Legend of Zelda 1.3 million, which is really interesting considering it's one of the key characters in the Nintendo stable. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, just the 1 million, but again, back then in 2017, maybe not as many Switches sold. Super Mario Odyssey 2 million. PlayStation 4, Final Fantasy 15, it says shipped 5 million. So that's where the difference is. Like, it says shipped 5 million, not sold through 5 million. And just wanted to stop on this biggest game right now, Grand Theft Auto series, sold 12 million units on its first day. So while I would say Final Fantasy VII Remake is a massive game, 3.5 million units sold, when you compare it to a lot of the big hitters, it probably has stayed more or less, the popularity has stayed more or less as it has in the last, I guess, few couple of entries, from Final Fantasy 10 to 13 to 15, and not counting the online games because not as many people seem to be playing those at launch anyways. But I think they had a bit of a misstep with Final Fantasy 13. We had that long process where Final Fantasy 13 took so long for them to develop that people kind of lost, when they finally got the game, and it didn't live up to the hype of waiting for 5 years, that people weren't as interested in the game as much. And because also they needed to recoup the money on the game, they ended up making 3 versions of the game for its fans, as the Final Fantasy 13 trilogy, where they had Final Fantasy 13-2 and then Lightning Returns. That kind of drew out the whole process of getting the next Final Fantasy game, which was Final Fantasy 15, which people had to wait another 3, 4, 5 years for. So when it's all said and done, the way that Square Enix have handled the franchise, certainly there were some missteps, and when Grand Theft Auto 5 sells 12 million units and Final Fantasy sells 3.5, it kind of shows you where both have gone. And it feels like Final Fantasy hasn't really developed as it could have. So yeah, that's I think 3.5 million units is great, but it needs to do more, because Final Fantasy was a big game back in the day. This was, number 1 PlayStation game, along with Metal Gear Solid and Gran Turismo. Alright, let's talk about Animal Crossing. So US Gamer writes, Animal Crossing New Horizons gets new merchants, a museum expansion, and more this week. Fine art, shrubs, and non-Bunny Day events will keep us all busy. Okay, so they say that Leaf and Red, 2 returning characters from past Animal Crossing games, are the April 23 update's big merchant editions. Leaf will help kick off the Nature Day event, Animal Crossing's version of Earth Day, this Thursday, and it will last until May 4. At his cart in the plaza, Leaf will sell different types of shrubs, a New Horizons way to beautify your island. Red, the series' notoriously shady art dealer, might be a more regular visitor. He's upgraded from his traveling tent to a boat that looks like it docks at the beach toward the back of your island. So it goes on, and I'll leave the link in the description below for you to check out. But seems like Animal Crossing is very popular at the moment, and Nintendo's doing a great job at getting its fans software updates for this. I think if they keep on continuing to provide updates for free for the duration or life of this game, yeah, I think this is the perfect game where you provide updates to keep people playing, because this is the type of game that people pick up every single day. So it's natural to have continuing updates. Even if they're small updates, people will still want to go back and check it out. Now let's get on to seeing the sales for Animal Crossing, because this was supposed to be huge. So NPD Animal Crossing New Horizons is one of Nintendo's fastest selling games ever. Okay. It shouldn't surprise many to know that Animal Crossing New Horizons sold well. It hit at a perfect time, as many regions around the world were enacting stay-at-home directives. New Horizons was the best-selling game of March 2020, but even in the context of Nintendo games, it sold massively well. According to the NPD group, Animal Crossing New Horizons debut puts it at the number 2 spot of the year, and the third highest launch month physical dollar and unit sales of any Nintendo game in tracked history. The only games to beat it in launch month performance via NPD's numbers are Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and Brawl. New Horizons launch month also clears the lifetime sales of all other Animal Crossing games, easily making it the best-selling game in the franchise, which is totally insane because Animal Crossing was already a massive hit on the 3DS. I don't know if it was as big on the Wii, but it was big on the 3DS and the DS. And we'll get into the exact numbers in a sec. And we'll get into the top 20 best-selling games in a second. But yeah, so this apparently, I don't have the exact number right now, but it was massive. So if it couldn't beat Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and that made 5 million sales, as we saw back here, sold 5 million units within its first week. Animal Crossing is going to be close. It's going to be. I'm not going to speculate on the number in case I get it wrong. But yeah, it's huge, and I'll try and get the number again for a future show. I think this list is clearer. But yeah, let's have a look at see the NPD top 20 best-selling games of March. And so we've got 1 Animal Crossing New Horizons. I don't think this is for all platforms. This is for all platforms. Okay, so number 2, Call of Duty Modern Warfare. That would be the remastered version. Number 3, MLB The Show 20, which came out this month. I think this would be interesting. This is easier because it's got the rank on the left-hand side. Number 4 is new Resident Evil 3. Number 5, NBA 2K20, which is very interesting because it came out 6 months ago. Number 6, Doom Eternal. Number 7, Persona 5 Royal. Number 8, Grand Theft Auto 5 just won't stop selling. I don't know who needs a new copy of Grand Theft Auto 5 anymore. It's like people just end up losing it somewhere behind the back of their sofa. But it seems like this continues to sell. I only ever bought 1 copy, by the way, on PC. 9, Borderlands 3, which did very well, but it's now slipped a little bit. Although it come back because this was ranked 21 last month, and now it's 9. Maybe people have to stay at home. They want to get together and play something. They want to play Borderlands 3. 10 Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which never stopped selling as well. 11 Neo 2. 12 Red Dead Redemption 2. 13 FIFA 20. 14 Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. 15 Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX Deluxe or DX. 16 Madden NFL 20. Hey, it's interesting that Madden sells less than FIFA in America. 17 Just Dance 2020. I don't know how that keeps selling, but it does. 18 Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. 19 Mortal Kombat 11. 20 Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 Remastered. So that's really interesting. Another remastered game. Seems like they can just keep putting them out there and they just sell. But this is more or less what I expected. Grand Theft Auto, Mario Kart, all of the typical games. Seems like those type of franchises just keep selling. And you've got Animal Crossing #1, which was predicted. Although I would say I'm surprised MLB The Show 20 beat Resident Evil 3, given that MLB is on one system and Resident Evil 3 is on 3 systems. But again, it could be that Resident Evil 3 wasn't supposed to be... I don't know what the exact release date was for Resident Evil 3. Maybe it was at the back of the month and there was only a few days where it counted towards the numbers. But in the long run, I would expect Resident Evil 3 to beat MLB. So that's the NPD for March 2020. Actually, because this article that I had didn't really go into much detail about the hardware. I've got the hardware numbers, but in Resetera, they did say hardware spending in March 2020 grew 63% when compared to a year ago to $461 million, which is very interesting. So it's saying in this pandemic, people are buying hardware. Nintendo Switch hardware sales more than doubled when compared to a year ago, while PlayStation 4 and Xbox One grew by more than 25%, which is a fair assessment. But however, I would say the Nintendo Switch is newer than the PlayStation 4. The PlayStation 4 has been out for at least 4 or 5 years, while the Nintendo Switch has been out for about 3 years. So people may still be trying to get the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch set a new all-time record for hardware unit sales in the March month, besting the previous high set by Nintendo Switch in its March 2017 launch month. So people are buying this for the pandemic. And Nintendo Switch generated the highest first quarter unit sales for any hardware platform since the Nintendo DS in the first quarter of 2010. Now this is for March, but I have the hardware chart. I have the hardware chart from Video Game Charts, vgcharts.com, for the 11th of April 2020, and the PS4 is still doing 85,000 units in North America, 115,000 in Europe, and 78,000 in Japan, for a global total of around about 325,000. And the Switch did 55,000 in the first or second week of April. 55,000, 44,000 in Europe, and 25,000. So this could be because there is a shortage of the Switch, and it can't keep up with the demand, given what we learned about in what happened in March, where the Nintendo Switch hardware sales more than doubled from a year ago. So And then we've got Xbox One, 26,000 in North America, 15,000 in Europe, and 31 in Japan, for a total of about 47,000. And 3DS does 1,300 in North America, about the same, 1,300 in Europe, and 1,400 in Japan, for a total of 4,431 units. So this will probably 3DS will probably go away pretty shortly, I would suspect. They will stop production of this probably at the end of the year, and so that will be that. If you want to get a 3DS, you better get one pretty soon. And I don't know why they left PS Vita, because that's a bit insulting. I'm sure it sold more than 31 units of PS Vita in Japan, but they don't want to cover it. Okay, now that we've looked at all the NPD numbers, let's talk about some games. Mario Maker 2's final update lets you create your own world map. Super Mario Maker 2's next update will add a world maker mode so you can craft your own level maps. You can create your own layout, add routes, toad houses, scenery, and choose from various themes. When you're ready, you can then drop in courses you made onto the route. It arrives in a forthcoming free update on 22nd April, which will also be the game's last. But there's plenty more in the update as well, including the Koopalings for use in new boss rooms, and even more even more power-ups from throughout Mario's platforming history. The SMB2 mushroom changes Mario's abilities to match those found in Super Mario Bros. 2, where he's able to ride on top of enemies, pick them up, and throw them. Also added the fruit suit so you can run on water, the super acorn so you can glide through the air, the power balloon, the boomerang flower, the cannon box, propeller box, red POW box, and the Goomba mask and the bullet bill mask. Okay, and then you can check out the trailer. You can do that in your own time. I'll leave a link in the description below. Where is this? This one is interesting, the SMB2 mushroom, because in Super Mario Bros. 2, we're talking the American one now, you are able to pick them up and throw them anyway. You're able to just ride on top of enemies and pick them up and throw them. You didn't need the mushroom. So it kind of changes the game a little bit. It kind of says that, okay, you're playing the Super Mario 1 or 3 level, but now you're going to be able to get this mushroom and then play as like Super Mario Bros. 2. So that's probably going to allow a lot different levels than we have seen in the past. And some of these other powers I haven't come across before in a 2D Mario game. The power balloon, the boomerang flower. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what kind of levels people can come up with and what kind of puzzles, I guess, because a lot of the time the game gives you the power up and then it's almost like a puzzle in the way that you kind of finish the level and see how quick or how well you can finish the level. But I guess the disappointing thing is that this is the last update, 22nd of April. This game was supported for about 8 months to 10 months, and I think if there is a audience, developers should continue to update the games, even if it's something small, just to continue to get people to come back, even if they split up all of these updates into smaller ones, like, you know, bring out the frog suit in a month, that type of thing. So of course, you know, you need to spend money to keep on providing updates, but you know, with Nintendo's method of selling its games, where they provide just the one game for a system, so you'll only get one Mario Kart for the system. This was a good way of continue the longevity of the game and allow it to to be sold throughout the life of the console. Our next article is about Fortnite. I don't play Fortnite, but this was an interesting rant. So Kotaku writes, Epic caves and releases Fortnite on Google Store, has weird opinions about Android apps. The headline is kind of true. Okay, let's have a read. Fortnite was released on Android devices around 18 months ago, but only as a standalone download, not as part of Google's Play Store. That puts apps at a big disadvantage because people only tend to download apps through an official store, so Epic has finally relented and made Fortnite available there. I'll stop there. So previously what you had to do was sideload the app. So you would either download it on your computer and then onto a USB and then stick it onto your phone and ask if you want to install it. Okay. In a statement sent to The Verge, Epic explained their decision came as a result of Google puts software downloadable outside of Google Play at a disadvantage through technical and business measures such as scary, repetitive security pop-ups for downloaded and updated software, restrictive manufacturer and carrier agreements and dealings, Google public relations, characterizing third-party software sources as malware, and new efforts such as Google Play Protect to outright block software obtained outside the Google Play Store. So this is basically a lot of jargon to try and scare people into taking their side when all they really wanted to say was, they said technical and business measures. Basically, Epic weren't happy with the cut of the money that they were getting, so they've been offering a lot of developers their cut of 12%. Epic was taking 12%, and then the developer was taking 88%, and they were moaning about how the Google Play Store took 30% while Epic only took 70%, and they didn't agree with the principles there. So that's why they decided to sideload the app to circumvent or go around the 70-30 split in the money that they were collecting. So goes on further to say, or not, when you consider that the company had to say something up front other than the more obvious truth that they simply didn't want to be paying the 30% cut that Google takes from all Play Store sales, which is only addressed at the end of their statement. Okay, so they kind of address it. So we hope that Google will revise its policies and business dealings in the near future so that all developers are free to reach and engage in commerce with customers on Android and in the Play Store through open services, including payment services that can compete on a level playing field. So, yeah, so it's a bunch of baloney because in the end, the article writes that please note that Fortnite has been available on Apple's App Store, which also takes a 30% cut since 2018. So they were just having a bit of a rant. All they really had to do was just say, hey everyone, it's on the official store now, and just moan about it quietly. They didn't want to do it. They just wanted to kick up a bit of a fuss for no particular reason, and it's a bit weird. So as the headline says, yes, there are weird opinions because ultimately the rant doesn't really do anything. You are putting it on the Google Play Store because you're desperate for the money anyway, even if it's 70-30. So we're going to stick with Google on our next story. It's actually Google Stadia free tier, newest games and everything else you need to know. So I thought I'd bring this up because, you know, when people say free, you get interested, and then you get invested into it and you want to find out more about it. And that's kind of how free to play works. So I also wondered, you know, what was exactly free about Google Stadia? And it turns out not much. It's more like a free trial. So This is a article from cnet.com. How much does it cost? Stadia is now free for anyone with a Gmail account. That's great news. Google opened up the service to everyone on April 8th, and those who sign up will receive 2 months of Stadia Pro, which comes with 9 free games in April, including Grid, Destiny 2, The Collection, and Thumper. At launch, the company offered, and has since discontinued, a Founders Edition, which included a limited edition Blue controller, a Chromecast Ultra streaming device, 3 months of Stadia Pro, Bungie's full Destiny 2 experience, first dibs on a username, and a buddy pass that gave a friend 3 months to try Stadia Pro. That has since evolved into the $129 Premier Edition, which comes with a white Stadia controller, Chromecast Ultra, and 3 months of the Pro subscription. In mid-January 2020, Verizon announced it would be bundling Stadia Premier Edition with new subscriptions to its top-end Fios gigabit broadband plan beginning January 29. So all of this is saying, hey, you don't actually get anything free with Stadia Base. So it's free, started April 8. The quality is 1080, and there are no free games and no game discounts. You go on the store to go and buy stuff, and they do give you 2 free months of Stadia Pro, so you can try out the 4K 60, and you get the 9 free games in April that you can try for 2 months. So here it says, free games, periodic limited window offers. So every month you'll get like some free games that you can try out. So yeah, you know, if you look at the cancellation policy, if you decide to cancel your Stadia Pro subscription or choose not to subscribe after your free 3 months are up, it reverts to Stadia Base, so you can still play any Stadia games you paid for. However, you lose access to any free games or content that you got as a perk of the Pro subscription. Google saves your progress and add-on history, so you can resubscribe and pick up where you left off. So yeah, so when people say Google Stadia free tier, it's a trial for 2 months for the Pro version. There may be some free-to-play games, but there's nothing free about it. You'll still have to go and pay for your games, just like on the PSN or Xbox Microsoft Store. Okay. Daniel Ahmed, he's an analyst with Nikko Partners in Asia. He's writing about on Twitter about ValueAct building a stake of over $1.1 billion in Nintendo. ValueAct is on the boards of Microsoft and Adobe and is looking at Nintendo's potential to become a broader digital entertainment company. He goes on to write, activist investor doesn't mean what you think, by the way. It means they are essentially interested in the company because they want to make changes or push the company in a certain direction. In this case, they want to push the digital entertainment media services angle. ValueAct first began buying the stock in April 2019 and has grown its position. Essentially, it looks like the digital transition isn't going as smooth as they want, and they believe they can provide value, pivot the company to become one of the largest digital media services. And Nintendo stock is up 4.2% on the news. Ultimately, it's a small stake in the firm, could provide valuable guidance as Nintendo continues its digital transformation in software and services. So how much, first of all, how much is $1 billion in Nintendo? So for that, we look at their market cap. But here it says in the Reuters article that Daniel has linked to, it's probably going to be about a 2% stake, 2.6 million shares. And as I calculated previously, before the show, Nintendo has $6 trillion market cap, which is about $60 billion USD, roughly, do the exchange rate as well, but, normally I just take off the last 2 zeros. So yeah, 1.1 to 60 billion is about 2%. We are aware that ValueAct is holding a stake, and we've been engaged in dialogue with them. We don't disclose content of our dialogue with our investors, Nintendo spokesman said. But actually, more on the point is that it's quite clear what this company is actually doing. So they're an investor company where they look for deals or value in markets. And in this case, they see the Nintendo market of, say, now the Switch is at about 60 million units. They see the Switch potential audience there, and they see that they don't actually have any of these digital entertainment media services. So what they've done is slowly built up buying capital into Nintendo to gain more influence, to convince Nintendo to put in digital entertainment media services. So you're going to go see movies, well, that's their intention anyway, films that you can buy on the Nintendo Switch, and just a reminder that on the Wii U they also had the Netflix app, so it's not like Nintendo's never tried this, but they're going to be ValueAct looking to push the potential of other services to increase their share price of Nintendo. So they are looking to influence decisions directly on Nintendo's board, but they're going to be doing it mostly with the frame of mind that to make more money as an investment. Yes, the side effect is that people will get Netflix on their systems, or there'll be other type of entertainment services, YouTube or streaming or things like that. So that's what ValueAct is going to try and do. If you're happy with the Switch as it is, ValueAct is trying to change what the Switch could be. They will add more. So it depends on if you see that as a good thing or a bad thing for the Nintendo Switch. Some people may want Nintendo to wholly own and wholly decide on decisions about what they intend to do with their hardware and their platform. But ValueAct is looking to get in and trying to influence these decisions. And, when you look up the Wikipedia ValueAct Capital, you can see here where in investor actions, ValueAct Capital is a very active investor that identifies companies that appear to be out of favor or may be undergoing a significant transition. ValueAct makes a significant investment into the company and then works with the company to make changes with goal of increasing long-term stock value and thus creating a profit for ValueAct. They will be in it to make the profit, and they'll be out of there. And this could hurt or be good for Nintendo. It ultimately depends on their users and if they accept or reject the changes. But here's a more interesting piece of information. So in Microsoft 2013, in May 2013, ValueAct Capital revealed that it had purchased $2 billion worth of Microsoft stock, which was less than 1% at the time. Shortly thereafter, the company made public announcements that it sought to join the board of Microsoft if the company did not increase its stock price through a stock buyback program or a larger dividend. The threat was seen as one of the reasons that Steve Ballmer decided to leave Microsoft. So you can see here, the company made public announcements that it sought to join the board of Microsoft. So it was threatening to join the board of Microsoft if Microsoft did not increase the stock price through a stock buyback program. So they were saying, hey, Microsoft, if you don't increase the share price so I can make money because I put in $2 billion worth of money into your company, I'm going to join your board, so I'm going to influence decisions. That's what they're saying. So that's what you're going to get with ValueAct, and you're going to get that with Nintendo. All right, let's move on to hardware news, and this is interesting. AMD announces Ryzen 3 3100 and 3300X desktop processors, B550 motherboards, 4 Zen 2 cores, and 8 threads for $100. Okay, I'm not going to read this, but let's have a look at the specs. So you're going to see here the Ryzen 3 3100 with 4 cores and 8 threads. It has a base of 3.6 gigahertz and a boost of 3.9 for $99. And if you can stump up the extra $20, you get the extra boost from 3.8 to 4.3 gigahertz, $20. I would say that's kind of worth $20 just by looking at it, because you're going to see, well, look at that. That's 0.4 gigahertz. You're going to get 10% better frame times for $20, for $20 for 20% of the price. 10% better frame times for $20 of the price. So you'll have to decide for yourself. But this is good news either way, because look, you get 4 cores and 8 threads. And you know, 4 or 5 years ago when I bought my system, I bought an i5 4690K, which had 4 cores and 4 threads, and that would have been about $300 for the CPU. And a 4-core 8 thread would have been an i7 4790K, and that would have been about $500, at least $450 to $500 at the time. Now you're looking at $120. In 4 to 5 years, you're looking at an 80% drop in the price from $500 to $100. So in the space of one generation, we've been able to drop the price of the CPU for 80%, which is amazing. I don't think if you look at GPUs, it would be as good as that. 80% of the price. Still not there yet, mostly because NVIDIA run the game at the top with their RTX 2080s and 2080 Ti's, and it's up to AMD to catch up on that front. And until they do, they're just going to keep improving by about 5% at the top and making you buy the new card for the same price, because 4 years ago, I think you could buy the GTX 1080 Ti for $650, and you're probably going to be buying the GTX 2070, which is about the same, for about the same price. So it hasn't moved in about 4 years. But you can see with AMD attacking Intel that it has clearly dropped the prices at the bottom end of the scale. You've got AMD Ryzen's 4 cores, 8 threads, 6 cores, 12 threads, 8 cores, 16 threads, an 8 core 16 thread for $300. For $300, that's a new territory. And the new PlayStation 5s are going to the next generation consoles are going to be about 8 core 16 thread, and we're already starting at about $300. So give it a couple of years, this 8 core 16 thread CPU will be $100. And this is not bad. This is not a bad system to get. If you're concerned that it's not going to match up with an 8 core 16 thread system, and this is not going to future proof you, yes, you are potentially right, but you're only spending $100 and you're going to get a system that performs perfectly fine for any of current generation's games. So if you threw Red Dead Redemption 2 at this, you're going to get 60 frames a second. you're going to get better performance than your PlayStation 5. I bought a Ryzen 2400G, and while I didn't have the RAM to make it run in dual channel, so I didn't get as much performance. With a Ryzen 24G, you can still perform. You can still have many games perform at around 60 frames a second, with a dedicated video card, of course, and that was 4 cores, 4 threads. That would work just fine. Even a 2-core 4-thread CPU like an old i3 would still be reasonable, and get your frames up to around 60 for many games if you have the right video card. So you can still build a fine system with these $100 CPUs, no question. If you're not particularly fussy, if you're not after like 144 hertz, 144 frames per second, you're just after like around 60 frames a second, these lower budget model CPUs would be just fine. And yeah, with this, there are going to be many YouTube videos that look at that are going to test these CPUs out, and you'll see that these CPUs are going to perform just fine. Microsoft Flight Simulator released their specs today, and this is one of the most demanding games I've seen at the moment for 2020. So let's have a quick look and see what it takes to run an extremely demanding game right now. So, and if you haven't seen the videos for Microsoft Flight Simulator, I do urge you to go and check them out on YouTube, because they look pretty good. And any screenshots lying around on the web. But it says the minimum spec is AMD Ryzen 3 1200, which would be 2 cores and 4 threads if I'm not mistaken. A GPU of RX 570, the most basic GPU that you can get right now. Video RAM is 2 gigs, that's fine because the RX 570 comes with a 4 gig version. RAM will be 8 gigs. Hard disk space would be 150 gigs, and bandwidth is 5 megabits per second. So you could play this on a very old system, and yeah, you would be able to run it on, say, like a 720p, and it will work. Yeah, low spec, low details everywhere. And then the minimum spec for NVIDIA would be a i5 4460 NVIDIA GTX 770. That would be my CPU right now, which is just 4 cores. And then the same VRAM and RAM specification. It's interesting that they put a minimum spec, recommended, and ideal, because a lot of games will just put a minimum and a recommended. So really, recommended would really be a good minimum to run this game nice, but not amazing or ideal spec. Not like what you're going to see on YouTube videos, basically. This is the YouTube spec. Okay, so the recommended spec for AMD would be a Ryzen 5 1500X, about 6 cores, Radeon RX 590, 4 gigs, 16 gigs, 150 gig hard disk space, and they note the increase of bandwidth to 20 megabits per second. I'm not sure why. Maybe you have more people on the same map, I guess. So yeah, for NVIDIA, they're looking at Intel i5 8400, NVIDIA GTX 970. So yeah, this would probably be for 1080p, running at, say, low to medium. I would suspect NVIDIA GTX 970 at 1080, and you'd get between 30 to 45 frames per second. I'd just be guessing there, because the jump to the ideal is huge, right? The GTX 970, if you look at this, AMD Ryzen 7 Pro 2700X and Radeon 7 for the ideal spec, and it jumps up to 32 gigs of RAM and 50 megabits per second for bandwidth. And the ideal spec for NVIDIA is Intel i7 9800X, NVIDIA RTX 2080, 8 gig, 32 gig of RAM. This is a huge jump. RTX 2080 from the GTX 970. Typically you'd see 1 or 2 graphics card up. So this might be like a 1080 Ti. 1080 Ti. But now is at least this RTX 2080 is at least 3 times more powerful than a GTX 970. So this is a pretty beefy system. There's really only a couple of cards that are better than the NVIDIA RTX 2080, which is the 2080 Super and the 2080 Ti. You're looking at $2,000 for the system right here. So if you wanted to play this at the YouTube spec, you're gonna look at this ideal spec. So if you barely want to play it, it will be the recommended, and the minimum spec is kind of just to get it running and have everything turned down. I guess they needed to put this just to get as many sales as possible, but it's not really a lot of people, they buy the game, try the game out on their system, especially like people who are into niche games like driving simulators or flight simulators. They buy the game, realize it doesn't work that well, and then they end up stumping up for a brand new system. So they buy the game first before they buy the system. Just to get people through the door, I guess, is this minimum spec. Okay, our last article today is kind of a personal one. This is from PC Gamer. The world's smallest handheld gaming PC has a built-in Xbox controller. Well, we already knew this because companies put out a number of these. This would probably be the third one, if I'm not mistaken. So this is GPD's new Win Max, packs an Intel Ice Lake processor into a specialized 8-inch laptop chassis designed for gaming. It's funny that it says, I made the mistake of buying a netbook years ago. It's kind of how I would start this article as well, because I made the mistake of buying a GPD Win 2. But let's talk about the article first before I get into my personal opinion about this system. Okay, so let's look at the specs because it will be easier to digest this way. The display is 8 inches IPS, which is up from 6 inches from the GPD Win 2. The resolution is 1280 by 800, so it's gone to the 16 by 10 style of screen. The GPD Win 2 was 1280 by 720, so it was a widescreen display, and that's pretty good design from GPD, I think, because the resolution 720p is just right. It's important to get the frame rate up and get games displayed at their native resolution. So this is a good decision to just make it a little bit higher in the vertical display on the number of horizontal lines, and I think this is smart to get the frame rates up, to keep it at around 720p, 800p. Okay, CPU is an Intel Core i5, 4-core 8-thread, 1.2 gigahertz to 3.7 gigahertz. This is huge. So previously it was running on some sort of Intel Atom CPU that was running around 2 gigahertz, if I can remember correctly, and clearly wasn't very good. GPU is Intel Iris plus 940. We'll get to this in a second. RAM is 16 gigs now. I think 3733 is the speed of the RAM, but I'm not 100% sure. Storage is now 512 gigs, up from 128 gig from the launch version of GPD Win 2. Wireless is Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5. In-out connectivity is one Thunderbolt 3. Wow, that's impressive. One USB 3.1, Gen 2 Type C, 2 times USB 3.1, Gen 1 Type A, one HDMI. So that's a full HDMI, if I'm not mistaken. An Ethernet RJ45 LAN. I don't know who's going to use the Ethernet for this, but you know, now you can set it up as a laptop and plug in your Xbox controller and play LAN. And the battery is 57 watts per hour, up to 3 hours of heavy use, which is probably about the same as the original one. I think the original one was about 5 hours. So it's around that ballpark, 3 to 5 hours. The most interesting thing is, of course, the 8-inch form factor likely precludes anything more. Okay, wait. The 8-inch form factor likely precludes anything more powerful than integrated graphics, though at least the resolution is not too demanding. GDP also touts being able to connect an external graphics enclosure to the Win Max by way of the Thunderbolt 3 port. Overall, this is an impressive collection of hardware for such a tiny system. So let's talk about the specs first, because you know, quite clearly, this is my main issue with the fact that they're using Intel here, and I think if they were to use AMD, I think the graphics would be better. I don't know what chip they would use. I don't have one exactly in mind, but AMD is beating Intel on desktop, on board graphics, by a huge margin. I mean, if you look at the onboard graphics for the Ryzen 2400, which is the chip that I have, and even now that the equivalent would would be like a 3200G. They have onboard graphics like Vega 8 or Vega 11, and they completely trounced the Intel onboard graphics by like 2 or 3 times. So I'm guessing or extrapolating that their mobile processors would be at least comparable, and at least had a performance improvement over Intel's onboard graphics, because that was one of the down parts to having the GPD Win 2, was that the onboard graphics were so bad. They really struggled with the games. It was hard to play many games, existing current games. So, for example, when I bought the GPD Win 2 a couple of years ago, 2018, it was hard to play anything from 2018, and you'd have to go back to, say, like a specific point in time between like 2014 to 2016, 17, 3 years, where the game would support the onboard graphics and play it at a reasonable frame rate. So things like Formula One 2015 or 2016 would work just fine. But if you went back to, like, say, Formula One 2010, it wouldn't understand the onboard graphics for Intel. And there were many issues with games that you couldn't play because it didn't support the onboard graphics. So I think if you improve the onboard graphics and put, say, the Vega chip in there, then you'll be able to play more current games. It wouldn't be so bad. So you wouldn't be scrounging around looking for games to play, trying to see if they actually worked or not. So that's one problem that I have with the chip. I think they could have gone AMD, but seems like they specifically want to stick with Intel. They said this as they were finishing their previous GPD Win 2. I recall that they were saying that they still wanted to stick with Intel for their next systems, and it's clear that that's what we're getting. I guess it could be a supplier thing. Don't know anything about that, just speculating, but they seem intent on keeping their Intel. So the other thing is, this is now an 8-inch mobile laptop that you hold in your hands to play games. It's funny because the 6-inch GPD Win 2 was already quite big. So I guess it depends. Like if you find the Switch big, I guess this wouldn't be too. If you find the Switch a reasonable size, I guess this wouldn't be too much bigger than that. But it, in my opinion, without having measured it, 8 inches seems like it's pretty big. Like even if you just look at this photo, it really looks like you're just holding up a keyboard to play handheld games. It might be worth just setting it down and plugging in the Xbox controller. It's kind of like those old DVD players that you could buy that you just play DVDs. And then, so my biggest issue with the GPD Win 2 was that it ended up running super hot. Now, that's obviously a personal preference. Some people may find that it's not that warm, and others like me will find it runs too hot. And then you'll never really know unless you try it out for yourself. But holding a warm laptop for half an hour is kind of it doesn't make for a great experience, because as soon as I go back to the Vita, it runs without heating up at all. Even with the Switch, it's slightly warm, but it's perfectly fine. But the GPD Win 2, because it runs with a hot battery and hot CPU, being stressed out at, I don't know, like 60 degrees, 70 degrees for the GPU running under your hand. The GPD Win can run very hot for my liking. And I don't think I don't think it's a good playing experience. So overall, it seems like it's an exciting piece of hardware, because a lot of people want to play their Steam games on the go natively, not streamed or anything. But I would suggest trying out the streamed version first, just to see if you can, if you get a good enough connection to play the games that you need to urgently play. You could play many things that doesn't have an effect on the overall gameplay, like turn-based games or role-playing turn-based games. Rather than, and this thing is going to be, the last GPD Win 2 was about $600 or $650, if I recall correctly. This thing's not going to be cheap. This is going to be around the same price point, $650. So is this better than getting a Switch? I would say if you find the games that you want on Switch, and then add up the cost of the console, add up the cost of the games that you want to buy, and then work out whether the Switch version would be reasonable enough purchase, and if it doesn't blow your budget, if you just buy 10 games for the Switch or 15 games for the Switch and call it a day, I would probably lean towards the Switch, just because it's a better piece of hardware than, say, the GPD Win 2. Although, we're talking, this is the Win Max, so I haven't got hands on with it, but if it's similar to the Win 2, that's my suggestion right now. Okay, so that about does it for the show today. As always, if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel, and look forward to seeing you guys on the next show. Thanks, bye.